Well, it feels like every year we have more natural disasters like these, and you can see the aftermath there. Hurricane Milton, Hurricane Helene. You know, when disaster strikes, agencies like FEMA come in and help those in need. Not only the agencies, but the people who power those agencies put their lives on the line in these messes. In an exclusive interview, FEMA's administrator reveals there was different information while they were just trying to help. Listen.
Did the amount of weaponized disinformation after Helene and Milton surprise you?
It did. I mean, I'm always expecting some type of misinformation. We saw it in Maui. We've seen it in other events. There's always been some information out there about FEMA in some way, shape, or form. But the volume that we saw during Hurricanes Helene and Milton was something that I have never seen before. And being able to get out there and give the right information became even more critical. And how do we get trusted voices into communities so they know, what's real, what's not real, and what people should be eligible for?
So joining us now is CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Sganga with her exclusive interview with the FEMA administrator. I just have to thank you for not letting this headline go. You know, as journalists, we talk about these headlines. We knew the disinformation was out there. You dug deeper. You got this exclusive interview, and you really realized the highest ideal of journalism, I think, and that's to expand the conversation. Tell us what you learned.
Reed, it's great to be with you. The FEMA administrator said here, not only is the disinformation surprising and overwhelming, but that the energy, the communication operation needed to stop deliberate attempts to spread false information about hurricane recovery efforts, including, by the way, by our foreign adversaries, really diverts resources from FEMA's core mission, which, as you referenced, includes life-saving rescue and recovery work of first responders. And that made, that more than during previous disasters, Milton and Helene, she prioritized speaking to the press every single day, amplifying the truth about applying for disaster assistance, safeguarding her teams. The levels of dis and misinformation really ranged from survivors believing they would have to pay FEMA back for immediate assistance to Americans in the wake of Helene and Milton refraining from applying for disaster assistance because they were concerned that with the disaster relief fund running dry, their neighbors, some of whom might have suffered even more storm damage, wouldn't get the assistance they needed if they also applied. Really heartbreaking stuff. We also know that the misinformation and disinformation heightened the threat environment for those first responders in disaster zones. And in North Carolina, an armed man was arrested and charged for allegedly threatening first responders. Criswell told me that she was so relieved and grateful to law enforcement when she heard of that swift action.
Swift action and necessary action, because oftentimes we forget some of these first responders are actually people who have lost their own homes and have left families behind in peril themselves. So let's forecast into the future, the incoming Trump administration. What do we see relative to misinformation, disinformation with a new administration coming in, knowing that a lot of this information comes from beyond our borders?
Absolutely, and we know that our foreign adversaries are aware of this mis and disinformation and act to amplify it. We've heard similar mis and disinformation amplified by politicians, including the president-elect. To give you a sense of just how tight things are at FEMA right now, FEMA spent half of its annual budget 8 days into the fiscal year. That was a combination of paying leftover repair bills plus back-to-back hurricanes. I bring that up because I also asked the administrator, back in 2019, President Trump took $155 million from the federal government's disaster relief fund and used it to build immigration facilities along the U.S.-Mexico border. So can FEMA afford to have those funds diverted again? Here's what she told me. Take a listen.
I can't even afford to get through the bills that I have for the rest of this fiscal year. And so any money that's taken from the disaster relief fund will just have an impact on our ability to reimburse communities for the recovery work that they're doing.
And Project 2025 has proposed shifting the financial burden for disaster recovery from the federal government to state and locals. The FEMA administrator told me that while it's important to have conversations about building local resilience, this kind of dramatic shift in how the nation would pay its bills after a hurricane or a wildfire would mean some communities would just not recover, that they would have to pick and choose what to rebuild in their towns and cities. Now, Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but he's also appointed Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy to slash our nation's $6 trillion budget to the tune of $2 trillion.
Well, and in the environment where, Deanne Criswell said that 2024 was a record year for disasters.
That's absolutely right. It's the second busiest tornado season, intense wildfires, twice as fierce as those that we saw 2 decades ago. Get this, Reed, 179 declared disasters by FEMA. Not only is that a record, it is a 50% increase from last year. And the administrator told me she's concerned that if the U.S. sees another jump in disasters like what we saw this year, FEMA will not have the manpower or the money to keep up with the demand, and that without serious investment in resilience, it puts in jeopardy the most vulnerable communities among us. Reed? It's
such an important conversation and such an important exclusive interview for CBS News, and we have you to thank. Nicole Sganga, thank you to you and your team for bringing that to CBS News 24/7. We appreciate it.
Thank you.